I think we'll be called to account for all the resources that churches and church people use on themselves. Yeah, I think it was Leslie Newbegin, I could be wrong, who said, "Let's face it, we even tithe to ourselves." I mean, most of what we tithe is then spent back on us. Programs for us, or our kids, or our seniors, or our women, or our men, and so on and so forth. So I think, yeah, we will be called to account for just the poor use of the resources that God has given us. Don't mishear me. I think lots of traditional and institutional churches utilise great swathes of money in overseas mission and concern for the poor and the like. So I'm not dismissing that, but yeah, the resources spent on church programs and church buildings, it astonishes me. I went to a church once that it had a hairdressing salon and a coffee shop in the church foyer area. It had its own gym, its own fitness centre in the church. I mean, the Christians in that church never had to sweat next to any non-Christians ever again. You could do it all in church. I mean, I look at that, I just find that astonishing. I mean, to me, it's a symbol of something. It's saying to that church, don't go and join a fitness centre down the road. Don't go and with your mates and exercise. Don't go and sit in a hairdressing salon with non-Christian women and talk about life and faith and what. Don't do that. Do it here in our church land. And to me, I think when money gets spent on stuff like that, someone needs to be held to account. I just feel like I should overturn some tables or take a whip out or something. I don't know, after I've had the cup of coffee, then I'll overturn the tables. And, to me it just seems indulgent. There's no question about that. Oh, I think there's an element of control. I think there's also a theological framework. I think, the text that often gets quoted, is come ye out and be ye separate, You understand why the injunction to Israel is made that way, because they are literally surrounded by fertility cults and religions, and not beyond them by superpowers. I mean, seeking to maintain a sense of distinctly Hebrew life and culture, and of course faith, is absolutely essential. I mean, they're in danger of being swamped. You can also understand it when Paul is speaking to churches, say in Corinth and other places in particular. Again, you're in places of high potential danger for syncretisation and for lapsing into the ways of the world. I mean, I understand that desire for protection, that coming out sense. But for Paul, I don't think he could ever have conceived that would lead to a church with its own men's group and women's group and children's group and youth group and hairdressing salon and coffee shop. And I mean, to him it would be like, wait a second, did something I say lead you to the impression that you should do that? But when Paul is asked whether you can eat meat offered to idols, he does address it theologically and practically, but he also addresses it missiologically, because he has a great concern. If he says to them, do not ever eat meat offered to idols, you will go straight to hell if you do it. If Paul says that, he knows every Christian in Corinth will never, ever, ever again be able to eat at the table of anyone who's not a Christian, because they don't know where the meat came from. They bought it at the marketplace. I don't know where it came from before that. It's meat. So if you say you cannot eat meat offered to idols, what that means is the Christians then have to withdraw and have their own meat. You'll have your own Christian lamb and your own Christian butchers, and it will all be in-house. And Paul knew that's screwy, that's weird. No, he understands don't allow others to stumble, and he's concerned about not giving the wrong impression. He gives good practical advice, but he doesn't actually say don't eat it, because he knows as soon as we do that, we end up with these two worlds, the Christian world and the non-Christian world, with no interaction between them. So for me to take Paul to that church that I was talking about with the hairdressing salon, the fitness centre and the coffee shop, I mean, it'd just be staggering to him. I mean, for him, the table was the primary place of social interaction. So if I can't eat at your table, I can't be missional in that respect. And Paul, that's just a bridge too far for Paul. He wouldn't allow us to do it. So I think it's actually a misreading of some of that theological language around separation. I think we ought to be separate in our citizenship in the kingdom of God, but we're not separate physically or relationally. I heard someone say once, Your missional effectiveness is directly proportional to your relational capacity. If you have a high relational capacity with the world, high missional effectiveness. If you have limited relational capacity, well, it's obvious, limited missional effectiveness. So if you're on 100 Christian committees, if you have to serve in the Christian fitness centre, if you get your hair done in the Christian salon, if you're in all these Christian meetings, you got no time for anyone, relational capacity is low, missional capacity is low. It's a very, very simple equation. And I think Paul understood that too. I want you to eat at each other's tables. Just kind of be sensible about how that's going to be read and what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat. I don't think that you have to drink alcohol just because your buddies are down the pub. Make whatever ethical or moral decisions you want to make about that. My concern is about relational capacity, physical proximity, hanging out with people, sitting with people, being with people. Doesn't mean that you have to buy into every activity or every kind of decision that's being made around you. There are a lot of American Christian people can have the idea that contact equals contamination. So if I sit in your backyard and you've just made up a whole bunch of margaritas and all the guys from the neighbourhood are all drinking them, and I make a decision I'm not going to drink but I'm going to hang out with you, somehow it's perceived that even being there somehow contaminates me or my witness. And I don't understand what's behind that. Try and abandon the idea that contact equals contamination. We can have contact with people who are having a lifestyle, moral or ethical decisions that we don't necessarily buy into ourselves without being contaminated by those things. And relational capacity is what we're trying to increase, and that increases missional effectiveness.